Welcome to the Cash Flow to Legacy podcast, where I touch on financial topics, have interesting conversations with experts, and ultimately teach you how to use cash flow to fuel your legacy. I'm Derek Morell. I'm with Bankonomics, and I'm an expert at teaching how the flow of money works, and I'm passionate about sharing it with others. Now, today I have a special guest, Tim Kelly, and I have been friends with Tim for several years now. He's a longtime real estate investor, everything from houses to later buying commercial properties, apartment buildings, some cool stuff like that. He's also a U.S. Navy veteran, a high performance coach. And so maybe we're going to see what it takes to put some of those dreams about cash flow and financial freedom into actionable steps. So Tim, thanks for joining the show today.
You are very welcome, Derek. Dude, I've been excited for this conversation, brother. It's an honor. Let's get into it.
Man, yeah, I'm really looking forward. We have a lot of ground to cover. I know my quick bio of you is likely very inadequate. And so we're going to touch some of those points. But first, I want to ask you from your own words, who is Tim Kelly?
Yeah, I'll just keep it quick. Just like you said, kind of life went through a series of identity transitions like a lot of us. Just a simpleton, grew up right outside of Chicago suburbs. And then I transitioned into college that I failed out of college because I realized it wasn't for me. Then I ended up joining the Navy. So U.S. Navy vet, spent 15 and a half years in the Navy. While I was in the Navy, got the real estate bug because I did not want to do 20 full years just to get some pension. So I started investing in real estate, quickly transitioned to the larger commercial deals like apartment buildings and mobile home parks. So investor, entrepreneur. And then I met other vets who were also doing real estate, who were also passionate about helping other service members learn about this stuff and build wealth through real estate. And so then I helped build what is now the premier military real estate investing education community, active duty, passive income, where we have helped thousands of service members, past and present, and their families create wealth, owning more of America. You know, the land they sort of protected, which is how Derek and I have connected. He's also a vet. Yeah. He was a service provider with his whole life insurance. He got my brain thinking. Now I have a whole life insurance policy myself. But the common thread through everything I do is just helping people create freedom, but then becoming responsible enough to use that freedom well. Like for years, I thought freedom was primarily financial, like make enough money, create enough cash flow, control your time. But man, what I learned is that financial freedom only magnifies the person you already are. And if you have not developed clarity and discipline and purpose and like strong relationships, more freedom does not solve the problem. It actually exposes it.
That's good, man. Yeah. And it's funny too, because just going back to what you said about ADPI or active duty passive income, if it wasn't for ADPI, and that's when I met you, I first got exposed to them through Markian. He's the CEO, is that his official title? Yeah. And you guys were all doing it. You guys were out there all over the place. And to me, it's grown tremendously. But if it wasn't for ADPI, I would have never stepped into the role I am now in Bankonomics at all, because I never wanted to be a life insurance agent, right? I had policies. I was doing the banking stuff. I was a real estate investor, and Markian's the one that reached out to me. And he asked me, told me about you guys and what you guys were doing and wanted that insurance stuff you talk about. Can you tell our clients about it? And I was like, dude, I don't want to be an agent. I think most agents are bozos, man. I don't want to be one. But we kept the conversation going. And I'll briefly say this because it's so important, because you're obviously part of ADPI, and it's so cool. I told Markian, I will do this on two conditions, because I didn't want to just jump in and talk to folks you guys were mentoring in real estate. I didn't want to come in and say, hey, do this, do that. And oh, by the way, one of the strategies I use is whole life insurance. And then that person goes to their, Aunt Susie, who sells whole life at State Farm or some other company. And they're like, yeah, I heard this guy, Derek, talking about whole life. And then she's like, oh, we do whole life. Well, they do, but it's like you'll get some, really bad policy compared to what we do. So I didn't want that. So I told Marky, and I was like, dude, I don't want to be an agent. However, I'll do it on two conditions. One is I'll never sell a policy or write a policy for someone that I would not sell or write or buy myself for my family. He's like, of course. And I was like, cool. Second condition, if we do that, we'll make about 5 times less money than our competitors per policy. He's like, dude, I want to have what's best for our group. And I was like, all right, I'll get my license. And then I got my license, and now I'm licensed in 30 states or whatever it is. And so if it wasn't for you guys in that connection, I wouldn't be talking about bankonomics. I wouldn't be doing this. I'm passionate about the topic, but it was ADPI was the whole.
Dude, you are such a rarity in the industry. And that's why I think the relationship really worked, for us and for you, because we just want what was the best for our members. We want them to be educated, really understand what they were getting themselves into. And because like you said, man, most of the agents are bozos and they're just trying to get paid. They're just trying to, because there's so many nuances that you have to understand for the long term, and all the fees and what it really means to use it as a cash flow accelerator instead of just something that will pay your family when you die. Right. That is completely a different frame to look at these whole life insurance policies than what you teach. And you teach it in the best way that I've ever seen, which is why I was working with you. We were looking at different policies to establish for myself. And man, I'm so glad that you're someone in this industry who really sets yourself apart from everybody else. And I'm glad to hear that ADPI had a direct impact on that. So that's,
It really is. But this show's not about me, man. I want to learn more about you. So one of the questions I have, so you said you got out of the Navy about 15 years in. So obviously, but most people that are military minded, it's like you want that pension in 20 years, right? So I mean, you were 3/4 of the way there, right? And so a lot of people that would be counterintuitive to a lot of folks that are more of that career, want the pension mindset. So a couple questions, and then we'll dovetail off of it as it goes. What was the transition like going from the Navy into something else? And then also, since you jumped into real estate, I'm assuming, I won't answer for you, you probably had some overlap. You probably started getting into real estate, or at least knew, okay, if you were like me, when I jumped out, I was in the federal government when I jumped into real estate after the Marines years later. And I had to go through the same questions. And I was like, well, okay, I dabbled a little bit with real estate. I know it works. It's not just theory on paper or guru theory. It's like I actually did a couple, some deals. It works. And then I'm like, okay, if I can spend the best hours of my day doing this, I can make far more money and then kind of create my own pension, if you will, or just have that mindset. So how was your transition? When did you first get the itch for real estate? And then was there an overlap to where you said, okay, if I do X, then I'll jump out of the Navy? Or were you cold turkey? You figured out real estate. You're like, dude, I'm going all in. I'm like, how did that look for you?
10-year mark. I just got off the deployment with a bunch of Marines, actually. Did you ever do a MU, a Marine Expeditionary Unit?
I was never on a MU, no.
Yeah, so I was on with MU 20. I deployed with MU 22 in 2013, and that was actually 2014. So that was my 10-year mark, and I got off that deployment, and I was like, dude, I don't want to do another one of those deployments. I don't want to leave my family. I don't want to sacrifice my time. And at this point, I wasn't investing in real estate, but a few years before that, I had used my VA loan to buy a house that ended up planting a seed, because without being in the investor mindset, it turned out to be a live and flip and a house hack. And so that 10-year mark was like, there's no way I'm going to do another. I got to figure something else out. I remembered how much I enjoyed going through that process. I remembered how much I enjoyed the art of looking at properties. And then I was like, actually, I saw that I was able to force appreciation in this house with some sweat equity. And then I was literally renting out a bedroom because we had 2 nice bedrooms. There was a master bedroom upstairs, master bedroom downstairs. The lower bedroom, I was like, we could easily get 3/4 of our mortgage paid for if we just rent out this bedroom. And that's what I ended up doing. And so it's what about if I just learn how to just do more of that? And so that's when I got the real estate bug, right? I started learning, reading books, listening to podcasts. And this is really an important part. And I don't want to just gloss over this. For about a year, I was learning a lot. I was reading a lot of books. I was kind of just isolating myself though. And I got some knowledge. So I was really hungry. And I'm I want to do large commercial multifamily, because I read this book, The ABCs of Real Estate Investing by Ken McElroy, who is Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, Kiyosaki's real estate advisor. So that that book, The ABCs of Real Estate Investing, helped me realize I could probably just go right into apartment complexes. I don't need to go build like a whole portfolio of single family homes. But I had major imposter syndrome, dude. Like at that time, I was like, okay, I'm sort of like living paycheck to paycheck. You know, I'm an E6 in the Navy, don't really have a ton of savings. How am I going to go from this to like owning an apartment complex? I had imposter syndrome. I didn't think I was worthy. I didn't think how am I going to go from that to that? Like I didn't feel like I was worthy. I felt like an imposter. And so until I invested in education, I had literally paid money to get a much better understanding of how real estate worked, and that helped my confidence. And with confidence comes competence, right? And then when I invested in education, that also came with some mentorship. So then I was in the rooms with people who were buying apartment buildings, and I was getting to know these individuals. And I was like, they're not that different than me. That gave me hope. That helped me break through the imposter syndrome because I was around other people who were successfully doing it. And I realized they weren't much different than me. And then I started actually talking like in a language that I understood. That gave me hope. And then I literally, once I at that point, I was in Virginia Beach, Virginia Station. Then I got orders to Pensacola, Florida. I got orders to Pensacola, Florida, knowing I was going to be stationed in Pensacola, Florida. I started networking with people in Pensacola, Florida, knowing how to speak the language of multifamily because I no longer had imposter syndrome, because I learned and I networked and I was speaking the language. I was connecting with people in Pensacola who were in commercial multifamily, brokers, investors, partners, just people in the industry. So the minute I got there, I ended up buying like actually a fourplex like the month I got to Pensacola because I wanted to do house hacking, live in one unit, ride the other three. But 6 months later, I bought a 42 unit apartment complex. 6 months after that, I bought a mobile home park. And from there, I just continued to focus on commercial and multifamily. And that's when I was doing that, I was sharing my story. That's when I luckily was on one of the biggest real estate investing podcasts called Bigger Pockets. If you've ever
Yeah, that's a big one.
Do it for the listeners if like you're not familiar. It's like this was back in 2018. I shared my story. That's when Eric Upchurch heard me on the Bigger Pockets podcast. He's the co-founder of ADPI. Him and Markion were like working on ADPI together. He heard me. I'm like, hey, here's my phone number. You know, he heard I was a chief in the Navy, buying apartment buildings, and I love helping other service members understand what I'm doing because they deserve to create wealth and freedom. He called me. We connected. So that's when I initially connected with ADPI, built the military multifamily academy and mastermind with Markion and Eric. And then I was active duty, buying apartment buildings and mobile home parks, saw the vision of ADPI, was really bought into it, was really dialed into that mission. And I was closing deals that were paying me 6-figure paydays. And so it's not like I just walked out of the Navy without like a plan, without some backing, or even just a vision. I actually had achieved financial freedom at that point. And at like the 12 and a half year mark, I made the decision, but I just had to finish my enlistment. And luckily for that last 3.5 years, I was in Pensacola and it was shore duty. So I wasn't like going in and out to sea, because in Virginia, I was going in and out to sea on ships. So in Pensacola, I quickly was able to accelerate my work with ADPI, my work on deals. So then I was really able to set myself up even more. So then at 15.5 years, my enlistment ended and I just ended up getting right out. And if I didn't get out, I would have had to go on at least 2 more deployments. I would have sacrificed time with my family. I would have sacrificed my health, sacrificed my sanity, and I wouldn't have been able to work on the things that I'm most passionate about, which was helping other service members create wealth and freedom. Right. And that's like the alignment of like my purpose and what gives me the most amount of energy. I think that's what drove me to just get out instead of just stay in the Navy because everybody else thinks that pension is this glorified thing. That one fourplex that I had, dude, it was paying more cash flow than the pension would have been. So I know I kind of rambled on, but like I tried to answer all the questions, like why I got out, how I set myself up. And then, like I said, once I got out, things kind of went downhill because I didn't have enough responsibility to handle that level of freedom that I had. But so that's kind of like the secret.
No, that's awesome, man. one of the key things, and I've heard you say it in the past when we talked, and I know your social media channels, you talk a lot about this. You're an exec, high performance coach and all that, but you mentioned something just a couple of minutes ago. You said with confidence, if I say it right, with confidence comes competence. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah,
And
man. Yeah.
yeah,
I actually
so
did. I just literally just posted a video just about like, where does confidence come from? Yeah.
yeah. So you were just as nervous as the next guy. I mean, it's a new thing. You read the books. You're like, oh my goodness, and you had to make the phone calls. I'm sure you sat in a bunch of events, and maybe you paid for some stuff. So I don't know that part, but I'm sure everyone had to do that to some degree. So with your confidence came competence, and that's when you probably, I know with commercial, and I'm not a commercial guy, but I know just from being around you guys, a lot of it you build a team, right? It's like you do like maybe a syndication, or you have a team and you have a different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a huge part. So
Yeah.
tell us for the watcher, the listener, maybe a 201 course real quick, but when you're creating, say you want to go after these deals, right? Well, you don't have the deal magically in front of you, so you kind of want to create the team. So tell me the mindset of what you're telling a lot of your real estate clients of like, okay, you're building your competence, you're learning some stuff, you're learning the game a little bit on paper, right? But it's a whole different game to go out, talk to people, talk to a team, gather a team. Then, the real scary part's going to the deals, making sure, then you're raising money and all that stuff. So give someone that's on the fence, they're like, well, I've been reading the books. And one thing I always say is like that taking the massive action is probably the clincher most people don't do, that it's the illusion of effectiveness. They do all the stuff. They get the business cards, the website, the this, the that. They read the 55 books, then they go to the event, but they don't take those other action steps. So put that glue that all together of what you tell people that's needed to get through the deal.
This is so good, man, because this is where most people stay stuck. And this is really what separates those who are able to succeed. And really, this doesn't just apply to real estate.
Oh, yeah.
So one thing you said earlier, and I want to clear up like where confidence comes from. And most people think that you get confidence, like which comes first, action or confidence. People think that you get like, you have to be confident enough before you start taking action. It's the other way around, right? The competence that creates confidence, meaning learning and this is where it's okay to isolate yourself, because you can never succeed in isolation, but it's okay to isolate yourself, to learn, to study, to speak the language. That you have to have a certain level of competence to give you enough confidence. So then you could take action. Like you have to be able to take action first, and then you're going to be more confident. Okay. You can't wait until you have a certain level of confidence. Everything's perfect. You got it all figured out. Then I'm going to go start taking action. That's where most people get stuck, because they think that they have to have so much confidence before they could take action. But confidence quickly comes when you educate yourself, and then you put yourself in rooms with people. Once you can start speaking the language, that's action. You're actually inserting yourself and intentionally putting yourself in rooms with other people who've already done what you're trying to do. And you're taking action before you feel ready. Okay. You can't see the top of the staircase until you start taking some steps up towards the top. Okay. You're never going to see the very top from the bottom. You have to start taking action to build more confidence. Okay. In terms of like the team, specifically for like these large deals, where the confidence comes from, where the competence, you're going to learn that there's different roles on the team, right? And someone finds the deal. That's the acquisition specialist. Someone underwrites the numbers. They're the underwriter or the deal analysis person. Then there's a person in charge of raising capital. They're not the only one who brings capital to the table, but they're kind of in charge of making sure all the capital required is brought to the table. And then there's an asset manager who manages the property manager. So that's like one of the things as you learn about commercial multifamily specifically, like you learn the different roles of the team. And then the confidence is knowing how you add value to that team. Which role is that? Once you know enough to say like, I am the deal acquisition specialist. This is what I focus on. This is what I could bring to the table. And once you could clearly articulate how you could add value to a team, that's when you start finding partnerships, right? And now you don't want to maybe run the numbers, and maybe you don't want to like manage the asset because you don't like managing people or leading people, but now you know what those roles are, and you could talk about those are the types of partners that you are looking for. That's having the confidence comes from learning the language, but inserting yourself in the rooms, that's action. Sharing with people and explaining your what's called your elevator pitch. This is who I am. This is what I do. And this is why it's meaningful. And that's the clarity piece that everybody that I talk to, even the most successful people, when they're stuck, it's usually 90% of the time, it's about around clarity. And this is right now, if when you're those who are listening to this, how you could apply this in your life, assess yourself on a scale from 1 to 10. How clear are you on who you are, where you're going, and why that's important? Assess yourself on a scale from 1 to 10. Who are you? Where are you headed? And what is your why? Why is that important to you? If you're not above like an 8, you're never going to be able to share anything significant with people around you. No one's ever going to like know who you are, what you do, or where you're headed and why that's meaningful to you. So you got to isolate yourself to do these things to get clear on who you are, like, and meaning like what you bring to the table, your value proposition, like which role on the team or what business, what is your unique selling proposition in your industry, who you are, how you help people, how you serve people is all about service, like where you're headed and why that's important. The minute you can get crystal clear on that and have confidence, you just want to make sure everybody that you talk to knows that and get very curious about them around you. And that is how you glue together a team. That is how you build an unstoppable team. And that's also how you lead, whether you want to lead your family, lead in your community, lead at church, lead run a business. That is how the best CEOs build a big organization, because they're very clear on where they're headed, why it's meaningful to them, but then they articulate that so people follow them. Think about it. So get clear. Assess yourself on a scale from 1 to 10. How clear are you on who you are, what you bring to the table, where you're headed, and why that's important? And then you can start making that very clear to those people around you, and that'll completely put you in a totally different ball game if you haven't done that yet.
Oh, I love it, man. Those are great answers. I could tell why you're a high performance coach. You're doing so everyone's getting some coaching today as well. Let's talk about, I always use the phrase getting your teeth kicked in, right? So a lot of people who have been around entrepreneurship in general, whether real estate or otherwise, a lot of them have a story where back, 6 years ago, XYZ happened. So tell us some scary stuff. It could be a real estate deal that maybe had a curveball. It could be a life event in the midst of stuff, just that crucible of stress where just life hits you from all different angles. Share something there, and then how. I always like sharing or hearing stories, and then typically, like a guy like you're always going to have that resilient side of it. Like, and here is how I got out of it, etc., or how God brought me out of it, etc. So give me that story, or it could be a morph of different things, and then how you work through it and how kind of long that took. I think people underestimate. They hear a success story, they hear you talk about a deal, and they're like he talked about a deal for 2 minutes, and they think it was like it took a week to do. It could have taken months. It could have taken years. Who knows? And so the same is with the traumatic experience. Sometimes those go through very, very long periods, and then you hear the success side of it, but you had to live every second of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year. So what's some stuff you could share in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, on the real estate side, I already said, like, dude, I was stuck in analysis paralysis and imposter syndrome for like a year before I realized I need to invest in myself. I need to be intentional about putting myself in rooms. But I think maybe it would be valuable to just like share a specific deal and how it failed and the mistakes. But I'd rather just completely, fully go open kimono and be very vulnerable and share like the thing that cut me the deepest in my life. Like, the Navy taught me leadership, discipline, responsibility, and it gave me an identity. When I left after 15 and a half years, I left a career, but I didn't just leave a career. I lost some structure that has sort of told me who I was. And, I learned transitions become dangerous when the old identity dies before the new identity has been intentionally built. And real estate was my vehicle for freedom. So real estate gave me a new mission. I became obsessed with creating financial freedom for military families because I knew how powerful it was to have options beyond a W-2 paycheck, a promotion, that pension. And cash flow is great. Cash flow, though, is not the destination. Cash flow is what gives you room to make better decisions. And the best investment returns are not always measured in percentages. Sometimes the return is having the courage to say no. And like money is most powerful when it reduces desperation, of course. But here's what happened. Like, I'll just say success, and the freedom exposed the deeper gaps that I had and my shortcomings. I achieved things I once believed that would make me feel complete. Like I told you, so many people think, hey, financial freedom, that's just the pinnacle, right? And I thought that way too. I built investments, I earned credibility, I created income and 7, almost 8 figures in net worth. And I helped other people do the same thing. But that achievement can really conceal like unresolved questions if you don't address them. Like you could be winning publicly and still be negotiating with your worth privately. And that's kind of a little bit of like what was happening to me. And when I had that freedom, this is the hardest lesson I learned. I got out and I did not have the level of responsibility to handle that freedom. I didn't become the person who was able to handle the freedom that I had. And I went down a dark path. I made some poor decisions. It got dark for me. Darkest time of my life, most challenging time of my life. Lost. God took my wealth away and I went through a divorce. And the darkest time in my life, I learned my most valuable lessons. And this is really crazy. Like I just got through reading the book of Job and
It's a good one.
and like to answer your question, like what helped me pull out, it was God. Like I surrendered. Like during that dark time, I surrendered to him. There was nothing else. I didn't have the strength to pull myself out of that situation and rebuild. I gave it to him. And I, have now a holy hour every single morning where I give the first hour to him. I pray, I ask for him. I ask for wisdom and I surrender everything to him. I surrender my life and my family and my future, my finances to him. And I pray for certain people that I'm connecting with in my life. But during the darkest time, I just got out. ADPI was growing, thriving, still doing deals. I was even helping people one-on-one as a high performance coach, but I was in a very dark place. And a few years before that, when I was active duty, I met a couple men in the Chiefs mess. I was a chief in the Navy in the Chiefs mess who introduced the concept of you don't just go to church, you actually build a relationship with Jesus. Like you actually get closer to him. And how do you do that? You read the word so you can understand him and get closer to him. And you could actually be open to receiving him and meet with other men who do Bible study, who talk about it, not just like going to church, checking the box, and that's it. It's like actually learning how to give your life to him, surrender to him, get closer to him. But I didn't really practice it because then I had freedom. I was just focused on my selfish desires, the homes that I was buying in all these different areas and like the vacations that I wanted to go on. And because those guys had helped me understand that God is our savior, he's the only person who has the power to like pull us out of something so dark. He was the reason why I was able to get through that, move on to my next chapter, and now become a different type of man who can now handle freedom. And since then, over really just a couple years, I rebuilt more than I had before. I just got married last year to the most incredible woman, my bride. She's a gift from heaven. She gets me closer to God every day. She holds me accountable to it. And we're going to build an incredible family and legacy together. And so don't ask yourself, how do I get more freedom? Okay. Ask yourself, how do I become the person who can handle the freedom that I'm asking for? You have to continue to grow. It's not a destination. Okay. It's going to require more from you. Once you hit financial freedom, it's going to require more structure, more discipline, more accountability, and higher levels of responsibility and ownership. Otherwise, you might start drifting and then you might start losing it. And I learned the hard way, and I hope that's the one takeaway is like, don't assume that once you hit financial freedom, that's it. Like, you don't have to do anything anymore. No, now you is a higher calling. God is going to make sure that if you want to maintain that and sustain it and continue to grow it, it requires a higher level of responsibility. So don't mistake that.
No, that's really good. Such powerful advice. And as men of faith, it's so important to. I always say this. I say I don't want to just be a businessman who's a Christian. I want to be a Christian businessman, right? It's an identity question. And I know you probably talk a lot about identity because identity gets to the roots, right? It's like what's under the ground? Like what's the roots of that tree? And it's so important. You mentioned imposter syndrome, and I keep hearing this a lot, like in my community or just hearing online. A lot of men struggle with it. Women probably do too, but I'm a guy, so I'll speak for men. A lot of men struggle with it, especially if they had tasted a little bit of success and then they get kicked in the teeth and then they have to keep performing. And so they feel isolated, where you said not to be isolated. The scripture talks about don't be isolated. It talks about counselors. You want an abundance of counselors around you. So a lot of people, they have to keep going because they don't want others to know what's going on. And so then they have this big imposter syndrome. So how do you deal with imposter syndrome, whether it was from your own story or you obviously coach a lot of guys, I'm assuming. So I'm sure this comes up all the time. So what are some keys that you have on that?
A big thing that I have to emphasize, I kind of mentioned it and you definitely just mentioned it, but you cannot succeed in isolation. Okay. And here's why. When we isolate, we are stuck with our own thoughts. Our society has programmed us to stay small, to work for somebody else, to not take risks, to not build a life of meaning and greatness. So when you have this desire to go create freedom, that's very different than what our school system and our society has programmed us to believe is possible. So you're wrestling with these thoughts and you want to go create freedom, build a big business, go buy an apartment building. And when you isolate, that part of your brain that wants you to stay small, wants you to stay conservative, wants you to not take risks is going to negotiate with you and win. And then you're going to be like, you're right. Real estate's really risky. You're just going to, it's going to negotiate with you and it's going to win. And I said, you do need to isolate. You need to put the time in to learn the language. Information is abundant right now. You can get the broken down Barney style step-by-step process, really how to do anything you want. Information without action is useless. Like if you're listening to this podcast and you don't have a takeaway, like some insight that you turn into an action step to change, this is just education. This is just like a form of entertainment. So education and information without implementation or change is simply entertainment, and that's useless. Okay. And when you isolate, you have to learn the language, but you cannot succeed in isolation. You have to go find other people, and you have to be intentional about putting yourself in rooms with other people who have already done what you're trying to do. And you can get to know them and they can get to know you. And you can get that clarity, like we talked about, on who you are, where you're going, what you bring to the table, and why that's important to you. And once you have that clarity, you could share with them. Hey, this is where I'm doing. This is where I'm headed. This is how I add value and how I can serve people. And this is why it's important to me, And once you can just have a natural conversation about that, you're going to realize that will put you in a completely different ballgame. And people take you seriously, And so imposter syndrome is real if you continue to isolate. And it's going to be really difficult to break through imposter syndrome if you're stuck with your own thoughts, right? And a lot of people also have this stigma like, well, if I pay for a mentorship, then I'm going to be in a room full of people who are just going to take advantage of me. I've heard that so many times. Or like, these are going to be all these whales who are going to, bring me onto their deals and screw me over. It's like, these ideas are unfortunately abundant because of our society programs us to like not trust people and like, that people are out there to just get us and manipulate, right? And there's also some people who have a history of it. Maybe they've gone through some trauma or they have some wounds which have to be dealt with and kind of healed and worked through and processed before you could kind of set goals and focus on get the level of clarity. And I don't want to undermine that. There's a big difference between like therapy and coaching. I actually just talked about this. Therapy is like really being like dealing with your past, like, and working through and processing some maybe wounds. We all have wounds. I definitely have wounds that I had to work through to get clarity on to move in order to move forward and create greatness and freedom in your life. If you have wounds that are unprocessed, that should be the priority. But working with other people to get to the next level is what the most successful people do. And they have accountability partners around that, because I don't have the level of self accountability that I need to achieve the goals that I have. Just like you, Derek, I'm pretty sure you have coaches and mentors, dude. The top tier, most elite athletes, Oprah, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, like they all work with coaches. They all hire coaches to hold them accountable, right? Because they don't even have enough self accountability to get to where they want to go. So how are you any different, right? How am I any different? No, I invest to get put in to surround myself with the right people who I could be open and vulnerable with, to share what I'm struggling with. And the more vulnerable you can get with those people, the more you're going to get out of it, right? But the more you isolate, the more you're going to stay stuck. Okay, you cannot succeed in isolation. And the last thing that I just feel obligated to mention is the cost of inaction is often a lot more expensive than the cost of taking action and making a mistake. And a lot of people are afraid to like invest in a coach or invest in some kind of mentorship program or invest in something else. So, but they sit there and they do nothing, and because they don't want to pay. They think about the expense. I'm like, if you're stuck on the expense, think about for 1 minute the cost of doing nothing. Fast forward a year. Where are you? In a worse place. You're more broke. You're more unhealthy. You're more unfulfilled. You still can't buy your wife a designer bag. You still can't take your family on a vacation. Or you invest in getting yourself in the right rooms, getting the right training and education so you can speak the language, and going for it, taking action, maybe making a mistake, which is the biggest lessons learned that will get you to the next level quicker. Most people think they're not willing to pay for information or coaching or mentorship, but they don't think about the cost of doing nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always say people mix up price versus cost.
100%.
Like there's a price tag of X dollars, but there's also a cost tag of opportunity costs. Most people don't understand. It's kind of like talking to someone, you know it because you're in real estate and stuff, but you talk to someone about inflation, right? And it's really hard for someone to grasp their mind around if you have $1,000 in your savings account today, and 30 years from now, you have that same $1,000 in your savings account in 30 years, even though it says 1000, like the opportunity cost is different. That might be worth like $400 today, but it still says 100. So there's like this opportunity. It's hard for people to grasp their minds because it's kind of intangible. And so the same is true what you're saying, price versus cost. It's like, yeah, something might cost, or the price might be X amount of dollars, but the cost of not doing it could be 100X of that. So it's so important.
Most people will never take the time to think about what is the cost of doing nothing.
Right. Because everything, like in my world with money, the slogan is you finance everything you buy, because we think through opportunity costs. We think through things you don't do still has a cost. So if you save a bunch of money in your bank account, you think you're doing really smart stuff, but if you do that for too long, inflation reverses it, right? There's always this intangible cost out there that's like it's like a heat-seeking missile going after people, and it's hard.
That's why we love real estate. That's why whole life insurance policies make sense, and that's why I'm very bullish on Bitcoin long term too.
Yeah. So two things. I want you to quickly tell us about your high performance coaching, because obviously you're very passionate. You're natural at it. Every time we've talked offline, you're always in that, like, well, what are you trying to do, Derek? Like, what are some things you need help with? And so you have a very natural bent towards that. So tell us about that. And then we're going to delve into maybe as we get closer here, we'll delve into a little bit of whole life. I know you have a whole life policy. I want to talk about that. It's super cool. and it's kind of a unique kind of angle. But tell us first about your high performance coaching, kind of how you got into it, what
Yeah.
it means. If someone wants to get coached from you, do you even, I don't even know if you offer services open or if it's a closed thing, or
Yeah,
just give
no,
us an
dude, like
overview.
I, the journey, like active duty, doing the podcast, like listening to podcasts, reading books. And as I was learning to become a better investor, like to learn the mechanics of investing and like the how to, it didn't take me long to realize 80% of it is becoming the person who could actually do those things, not learning the mechanics of how to do it. And so I kind of sort of got a little bit obsessed with personal growth and like development. How can I become a better person, a better, you know, relationship, a better husband? Like, how can I learn how to add more value? How can I be healthier, more clear, have more discipline, have, a higher level, like a higher level of emotional intelligence, a better communicator, you know? And so through that journey, I read a lot of different books. There's so many really good mindset books that have been profoundly helpful in my journey. But one book that I read was called High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard. And he is an incredible speaker, coach, author, built an incredible community, and he created the High Performance Institute and the High Performance Academy. And for a long time, just my natural tendency to just want to help people and want to mentor people. Like a lot of people would come to me, and I would, for years, I would just coach people for free. I would just want, like, what are you wrestling with? What are your challenges? Here's what I did, and I would just want to naturally help people. And I'm like, I actually enjoy helping, but like, how could I really put some structure around my coaching and really help get people to how could I become that next level, like elite level coach? Like having very powerful conversations with them. Like one conversation will be unforgettable. They could completely transform. And so then I became a certified high performance coach through Brendan Burchard's program. I did that back in like 2020. And so that's how I got like certified, learned a lot of frameworks, learned, a lot of like how really to deliver coaching, how to structure maybe the coaching sessions. And then I quickly like learned where my strengths were, and I put my own kind of twist on it. And coaching became like the deeper legacy work for me. Eventually I realized like the most important asset that I could help someone build was not like a portfolio, bro. It was the person making the decisions. Like that's who I want to help build, becoming the person who could handle the freedom that they're asking for. Right. Like if you're working in a business, your business will never consistently outperform the leader you become. Right. The ceiling is rarely like your strategy. It is often your identity. Just like you said, man, the identity is so important, right? Like financial freedom answers like, can I? But like your purpose answers, why should I? That's like, and your drive and where you're headed and knowing that is so important. It all goes back to clarity, right? Assessing yourself on a scale from 1 to 10, how clear you are on who you are, where you're headed, how you serve people and why. And once you no longer have to work purely for survival, you have to decide like what your life is for. Like, what is your purpose? And so at this point, I love to help ambitious people become the person that everyone thinks they already are. If that makes sense. Like there's a very consistent gap in where high performers and ambitious people, where they think they are. They think they know there's a gap. They know there's more to accomplish. They compare themselves to other people. Unfortunately, like they're always striving. There's a big difference between people on the outside looking in. People think that they've got it all figured out. They've achieved the pinnacle. So there's always a gap between where the most ambitious people think they are and where other people think they are. And I help close that gap by helping people get more clear. Assessing yourself on a scale from 1 to 10 is the first step. More energized in pursuing your mission that's meaningful, and just more aligned with your actual purpose, right? Too many times, like this has happened to me. And one of my coaching clients, we literally talked about this the other day. He was literally standing on the summit of this mountain. He had done all these incredible things in business, was killing it. And then he realized he was standing on top of the wrong mountain. And we had to identify what that next mountain was so he could kind of go down and descend and start climbing up that mountain that will actually serve him and serve those around him much better. And
Wow.
too many of us are literally climbing up this ladder, climbing up this mountain that's completely just leaning against the wrong wall, or like climbing the wrong mountain because someone said we should, or we think that we should, right? But we don't have, nobody takes the time to ask those tough questions. And I love being able to just get real with somebody, ask them those questions that nobody would ever dare to ask them, and then help them get clarity on what they really need to do, like what steps are next to get more clear, more energy, more aligned, higher levels of discipline and influence. And courage is a huge piece too, man. Like, so we're so courageous on paper in business meetings doing deals, but I'm telling you, the most successful people don't have a high level of courage they're usually avoiding a conversation with somebody they love, their spouse, kids, parents, siblings, because they're so focused on the drive of everything else, but they don't have the courage to have a tough conversation with somebody they love and who they say they're fighting for. Right. And so I love challenging people. It's like, what conversation are you avoiding right now with someone you love? Because you're using an excuse that your work is more important. And most people can answer that question pretty quick. I'm telling you, this is something I do with all my clients. We always, one of our sessions, we go really deep in courage. And 99% of the time, it's around a conversation that they are avoiding with someone. And so, yeah, like I said, if this is resonating with you, I have to be very, usually I only work with people through like referrals that I like and that I trust. But if this is resonating with you, I have this really cool clarity audit. As we know, clarity is the number one thing for me. I like created this really cool interactive thing. I used AI to create this really cool interactive assessment where you could start answering those questions on clarity. And then it'll send you like a PDF to figure out like, well, how you scored yourself and what the next steps are. And then, if this is resonating with you and you know you're capable of more, and then it'll give you an opportunity to book a call. But I want you to go through that clarity assessment first. I want you to get understanding of where you're at. And then if you end up booking a call, I'll kind of see those results. We'll talk about them. We'll figure out where you're stuck. And then we'll pinpoint what your next courageous, bold move needs to be to get more clear, more aligned, and more energized. But yeah, I'm always looking to work with the right people, but I have to be I have to be selective. I'll just say that.
Sure.
I'm only looking to work with maybe one or two people for the rest of the year because a lot of people can't afford it. I'm not going to lie. It's not like I charge like $10 a session or something like that. But it'll be life changing, and if you're trying to learn more about it, definitely, I'm sure Derek will give you a link to go do that clarity assessment, and then you'll have the option to book a call with me and we can kind of
I'll grab, you'll send me all that stuff. I'll put it down in the show notes, the description and stuff if people want to hit that up. And so totally awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that. So let's round up one last topic here. So yes, I love whole life insurance. I develop what's called the Bankonomics process. And part of the process is the foundational place of where your capital stored, savings, grade level, all the fun stuff, the investing, that's all done from leveraging this pile of cash from our fortress, what we call it. But really a big function of that foundation is properly designed. I can't say that enough. Properly designed. I want to put my money in 99% of the options out there. So the way we design it, I'll stand behind what we do. By whole life insurance specifically, because there's so many benefits. But not to get into all of that, tell us about what you found in a policy. It wasn't to me, but you found a cool way to do it. And I know the company you're talking about, but tell us a little bit about your thought process and how your policy is constructed. I'll let you kind of let the cat out of the bag here.
Yeah, man. So, full disclosure, Derek did not, he did not ask me to say this. I was working with Derek to get a couple different policies established, and then a divorce happened in my life. And then it just didn't make sense at the time to secure a whole life insurance policy as I was going through that time. And then during that time, I also couldn't do any real estate deals because I was going through a divorce and it would have been a marital asset. It's just a whole mess. And so I had to take a pause. And I think there's a reason why God did that, because then he sent me down this rabbit hole to learn more and more and more about Bitcoin. And I'm very bullish on Bitcoin. I have a high level of conviction in the long-term future of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not like any other cryptocurrency. It's not in the same asset class. It shouldn't be classified. Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's not the same. Solana, Ripple, like meme coin, all it is, like thousands of other alternative coins. It's not the same. Like Bitcoin is completely in its own separate category. And then I learned that I could actually get a whole life insurance policy denominated in Bitcoin. I was like, wow, that's interesting. And so did a bunch of research, found a really cool organization that could establish those policies. And I got the Bitcoin whole life policy because I think I wanted to solve two different problems with one coordinated, like, strategy. And so first I wanted, the permanent life insurance to protect my family. Like, getting this policy at some point, I'm going to die. And that is a big legacy that you can leave, like, regardless of what happens to me. And at this point, like, I would rather have my money or have my family in the future inherit Bitcoin and understand how to custody it and understand why I got it versus have them inherit a bunch of US dollars, because the government is printing US dollars. They are manipulating the currency and it's going down in value. Just like Derek talked about inflation. This is a whole different conversation, but the Federal Reserve was created, literally established to control the currency and create inflation, which really only benefits people who own assets. That's why business owners, people who own real estate, they actually reap the benefits of inflation because their values of their assets go up. If you don't own assets, if you have a W-2 job or you're a self-employed person you're running your own business and you don't own any actual assets, right? It's a K-shaped economy. You're going to feel the wrath of inflation because expenses are going to go up and your salary's not going to keep up. But if you have assets, it's going to keep going up. And the Federal Reserve was literally put in place. And if you haven't read the book, Jekyll Island, the creature on Jekyll Island,
Oh yeah,
I really recommend it. You'll learn a lot about this. You can even just Google it or let ChatGPT summarize that book and for you. And so you'll understand where I'm coming from. But I don't save in US dollars. I save in Bitcoin. So I wanted that life insurance and that legacy to be paid out in Bitcoin because I believe where we're headed and the future, Bitcoin is the future of our financial system. And second, I wanted just that long-term exposure to Bitcoin because just like an incredible whole life insurance policy that Derek could help you create, as it's growing, you could leverage against it, right? And put it into assets to accelerate your cash flow or to pay, like, because life happens. If you want to put a down payment on a house, if you want to pay for your kids' college, or if you need cash quick, like, you can leverage against all that growth over time. And you got, I'd rather save my savings vehicle. I don't want it in US dollars. I want it in Bitcoin. So it's the same thing. Now I got a whole life insurance policy in Bitcoin, but I did not want every part of my financial life dependent on, Bitcoin's price or volatility. And right now we know it got up to 126 last October. Right now it's only like half. It's like a 50% more or drawdown. So for me, I love it because it's like I'm getting it so cheap and I'm continuing to buy every single week, dollar cost.
Yeah, it's 64 right now. I'm always looking at it.
It shot up over this last week. It did thrive. Yeah. And like if we talked about that specifically, you'd be blown away because everything else is down. And right now, Bitcoin is up. So everybody thinks it's so volatile, but the volatility, there's a volatility score. And over the last couple of years, the amount of volatility has actually very much softened, and the S&P 500 is actually now it's almost as volatile as the S&P 500 is. And when like small cap stocks, they shoot up and down. There's a lot more risk and everything. And other cryptocurrencies, they're super volatile. But Bitcoin itself has significantly dropped his level of volatility over the last couple of years because a lot more people are stacking it and most people are not selling it. They're holding on to it because it doesn't make sense. They're just buying more and holding it for the long term. So the volatility has significantly gone down. But when I got this policy, I didn't want like it dependent on the price of volatility. The whole life component gives me the guarantees. It gives me the liquidity and a more conservative foundation. But the Bitcoin component of it gives me exposure to scarcity. There's only 21 million Bitcoin ever created. Nobody's going to continue printing. Nobody controls Bitcoin. Everybody that owns Bitcoin, that runs a Bitcoin node, that holds it on their wallets, that's tapping into the Bitcoin blockchain and network, we are Bitcoin. Nobody's controlling Bitcoin like the US government controls and manipulates the US dollar, or like the owners and founders of Ethereum are controlling and manipulating Ethereum, or the owners and founders of Ethereum or Solana and Ripple, all the other cryptos. Those are people who control it, who could print it, who could mine it, And so nobody could manipulate Bitcoin. It has its own protocol. It's never going to change. And there's only 21 million that are ever going to be mined. And then that's it, right? The most scarce, most sound asset. So for me, it wasn't about chasing the highest possible return. Like I'm not trying to trade in and out. I'm never going to sell the Bitcoin. It was, about creating my own financial system with protection and with access to capital, long-term growth potential, and a defined legacy for my family. Like I wanted to build wealth. I also wanted to transfer it efficiently and responsibly. And dude, like nobody could take away my Bitcoin. If it's in cold storage wallets, if your money is in a bank, you have to request permission from the bank to access your own money. If you put $1 million in a bank and then the next week you're like, hey, I need 250K. How long do you think it's going to take for you to get your own money? Because they've already lent it out. They've already what's called rehypothecated. They've lent it out 7 times, which is how banks get away with making so much money, because they lend out the money that you give them, right? I want to build wealth, but I also want to transfer it efficiently and responsibly. The simplest way I would say is this: I bought Bitcoin to protect my purchasing power to combat against the like inflation, but I bought whole life insurance to protect my family. I'm going to have multiple policies. The policy allows those two convictions to work together. And when I realized I can get a whole life insurance policy denominated in Bitcoin, I'm like, holy crap, this is incredible. But most people would think it's so crazy and foreign at this point. But I'm telling you, I don't know I would be this convicted unless I had conversations with you, Derek, about the power of whole life insurance for people with like us who are looking to excel, like real estate investor mindset, not someone who just wants to sit let it ride. Like people want to actually access that growth, take advantage of that liquidity and the death the death benefit all on top of that. It's like, man, I want to see how many I can get, one for each of my kids, one for my spouse. And so, but I want to thank you for that, because I don't know if I would be this convicted in whole life. And if you didn't help me understand a lot of the concepts initially.
Yeah, I call it's like a different chassis, right? It's like everyone's on the banking chassis. You talked about it just a second ago, fractional reserve lending and all that stuff. Yeah. And like with your policy, it's so, and this is one of those things that's hard for people to grasp. It's denominated in Bitcoin. So if you have, say, 1 Bitcoin in your policy, whether Bitcoin's 100,000 or 64,000 or $1 million, when you take a loan, if you took a 60% loan to value loan against that 1 Bitcoin, it's 60% of 1 Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin's worth 100K, which it will be eventually again, and we'll keep going up, you might turn that eventually into, you take a loan, maybe you turn that into $60,000 or whatever. And let's say Bitcoin crashes again. Well, your loan in the policy is denominated in Bitcoin. So it's just you're 60% of 1 Bitcoin. It doesn't matter if Bitcoin's $1 million, $100,000, or if it goes down to 20,000, versus if you had Bitcoin on Coinbase or all these other platforms, you can take a loan against your Bitcoin, but you're mixing the denomination into dollars. So everything's extrapolated from Bitcoin into it's worth X amount of dollars. You have a loan at 40%. Well, Bitcoin crashes, that loan is now at 75% or 80%. You get liquidated, and that's the big risk. You'll never get liquidated because everything's denominated in Bitcoin. It's like that whole, you're in that ecosystem, which is really cool. That's one of my favorite parts about that.
Dude, I mean, 100%. And think about, like, go back 10 years, and if you're listening to this, like how many US dollars was your home like 10 years ago? Let's just say today it's a $500,000 home. 10 years ago, that same home was probably like 200 or something like that, 200K. Now it's 500K. Maybe in the next 5 years, it's probably going to be $1 million, right? US dollars. So let's just say a $500,000 home. Now, let's just say that is 5 Bitcoin. This is easy math. Let's just say, 100K Bitcoin. 10 years ago, that probably took like 50,000 Bitcoin to buy, right? In 10 years, when Bitcoin's at $1 million, that same house is only going to be one Bitcoin. And would you rather have access and have your savings in a currency that's denominating? It requires more and more US dollars to buy that same house, or would you rather have an asset be stacking in an asset that in 10 years it's only going to take a fifth of that same currency? It's going to take less than, it's only going to cost one Bitcoin to buy a house versus $1 million. And so again, the illusion is that the value of the house, wow, the value doubled in 10 years. No, 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 no. The value of the dollar just appreciated that much. So it requires more of that crappy fiat currency to buy that asset. That's why I'm saving in an asset that will require in 10 years less and less of that asset over time. I'm going to be able to buy a house with one Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Versus
And
$1
being,
million US dollars.
oh yeah. And being finite, like you said, the 21 million, I think they mined, are they up to almost, there's like 1 million left, but it will take like another 100 years or something to mine it.
Absolutely.
But then you have to also add, there's conservative estimates are probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 million or so are lost.
That's right.
Meaning, you hear the story, some dude had 100,000 Bitcoin and he threw out his old computer and the hard drive goes away. And it's like, one dude bought like a landfill trying to find it. I think it was like in Europe somewhere, or England or something. So you have like lost Bitcoin. So therefore, the scarcity, 21 million scarce. Now, if the true number is 16 million, it gets more scarce. It'd be like if in your city that you're living in now, they're like, all right, we're going to level all the houses down to the ground, but we're only going to build 1,000 houses in your city. Like, the first people that buy the houses are going to be like, okay, it's going to be a little cheaper, but as the houses get built, there's less of them, so the price goes up. And then all 1,000 houses are built, but there's a bunch of other people that want to buy it. So there'll be less Bitcoin or less houses, but the pricing of each just skyrockets. That's how supply and demand works.
An easy way to kind of articulate it is that like having like 0.1 Bitcoin, like having a tenth of a Bitcoin now, is the same thing as going back 50 years and buying a condo in Manhattan, because they're not making any more of it, right? That's a family legacy. People who own that, they don't sell it. It's a legacy that their family, that it's passed on because millions and millions and millions of dollars. Right now, owning a tenth of a Bitcoin is the same, is a very comparable way to look at it.
Yeah.
It's going back 50, 60, 70 years and purchasing a high-rise condo in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Because there's no more space. They can't build any more of it. Scarce. Bitcoin is the only scarce asset because the US dollar, they're just going to keep printing it, man. There's no way out of the trillions and trillions of dollars with the debt that our government is in right now. There's no way out of it other than printing and then hiking up taxes that we all fall back on, which is why I like real estate and why I like Bitcoin mining, Derek, because all the miners that I have, I could depreciate like commercial real estate. They're pumping Bitcoin into my wallets every single day, and I could depreciate all that equipment. So I'm taking advantage of the accelerated depreciation through all my miners, and my miner's actually there in Houston.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So we're gonna have to have a part 2, man. I've been geeking out over crypto.
My wife's may not be. I know we gotta go run some errands and bebop around.
Yeah. So we'll land this plane, but man, I love talking about Bitcoin, and even with like a denominated, like a whole life policy I do, it's like, well, the second best solution is if you can't have it denominated in Bitcoin, unless you get a Bitcoin whole life policy, is I might take a loan in fiat and convert it into Bitcoin or into those assets that hedge against inflation. And the other thing too is, like you mentioned it, I love it, but I always tell people this. I'm like, there is no Bitcoin headquarters. So if like the government wanted to raid Bitcoin, we're going to take them down. There is no office. There's nothing there. If America outlawed Bitcoin, it would still go on because the world has it, right? If China outlaws it, it still goes on. It's beyond borders because of all the way it works.
The government has a lot of Bitcoin. They're stacking their own. They're quietly stacking their own Bitcoin reserve. They're running Bitcoin nodes. Countries, sovereign nation, dude. They're all stacking a Bitcoin, Bitcoin strategic reserve. There's
like an arms
corporations
race.
and companies. That's their business model now, where they have, and then they create products and stocks and preferred stock options based on their business model of being a strategic Bitcoin reserve. But a lot of people think because the price dropped, like, oh, Bitcoin's toast. And what the price action does not reflect what is being built over the last few years. And don't forget, before Trump came into office, the last presidential administration was very anti-cryptocurrency, very anti-Bitcoin. Now, dude, the Bitcoin, one of the biggest Bitcoin mining companies is ran by Trump's son, Eric. Eric Trump is running one of the biggest Bitcoin mining companies in the world. The American Bitcoin is what it's called. And Trump and families and institutions, corporations, insurance companies, they are all stacking Bitcoin because they understand it's the future of money. It is the only scarce, the most hard asset. Like gold, gold is actually doing good because people don't trust the government. People don't trust the US dollar. And gold has been just the world reserve for so long. But if you want to transfer it, you it takes gas, it takes fuel, it takes energy to move it, or you could just transfer your Bitcoin from one wallet to the other instantaneously for free across the world. And you don't have to wait for the stock market to open. Yeah. 24/7 Bitcoin, you can trade on the Bitcoin blockchain 24/7.
Well, and one thing I teach, and we'll land this plane here, is the flow of money, right? And so I often tell people, I'm like, think about water, right? So you got the mountains and they collect water. There's streams flow into rivers, and the rivers flow into oceans, and the ocean evaporates, and it goes into the air. Then the rain comes down, and there's this cycle of flow. It's not necessarily more water is being created. It's a flow, an ebb and flow all around. Well, the same is true with money. So if you look at the macroeconomics of, in the fiat world, right? Like Bitcoin crashes and all this stuff, and it goes in and out. Well, it's not even that, besides the issue with the fiat currency in general. But what's happening is there's a flow of money. It's not the money disappears out of one asset class to another. It's like it flows. Maybe it flows out of some crypto, and AI is hot, right? It flows into AI, and then AI is going to have its thing. Then people are going to sell, right? The smart money will sell, and then it will flow back into, where does it go? It's going to skip a lot of these other things that are all-time highs. It's going to flow back into Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin's going to, in the US dollar world, is going to increase up. And so there's this constant flow of money. And so even what I do with my policies and what I teach people with economics is we just put a little reservoir, a little bucket. We're little peons. We're a little blade of grass in this field of grass. We just put a little bucket and we take a piece of the flow into our bucket, and then we can take loans and put it into those assets or all that. So what's interesting is we want to master that flow of money that's all around us. And so I'll say this in closing. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm excited to be with you on this journey. I'll be sure to leave Tim's info below. You can reach out to him, let him know that you enjoyed the podcast here, and he has his own channel. Subscribe to his channels. Please subscribe to our channel, like and share our videos, and stay tuned for our next episode. God bless.